This beautiful girl is named Lee Sol. She never imagined that she was the princess being sought by the president of Korea. Before being crowned as a princess at the age of 26, Lee Sol lived with her adoptive family and studied at a university, majoring in Korean history. To earn extra money, Lee Sol spent her time working part-time at a traditional performing arts show. She was chosen to wear a princess costume, and it was at that moment that she met a handsome diplomat named Hae-young.
공주 맞죠?
To welcome important guests from abroad, Hae-young persuaded Lee Sol to continue wearing the royal gown and promised to pay her of $100. However, in reality, Hae-young never ended up paying and claimed that he didn't have any cash. That made Lee Sol furious. She kept following him everywhere to make sure Hae-young truly paid her money. The government, which was actively promoting the restoration of the royal lineage, received full support from the Daehan Group, conglomerate none other than Hae-young's family business. It turns out that in the past, Hae-young's grandfather was a trusted confidant of the royal family who was often given the mandate to search for Emperor Sunjong's great-grandchild. One day, as his grandfather had instructed, Hae-young hurried to find where Lee Sol lived. As soon as he arrived at the address, Hae-young was completely stunned to see that the girl who had been following him the other day was actually Lee Sol, the very person his grandfather had been looking for. He was furious because he felt deceived just the day before at the art gallery exhibition. Lee Sol had introduced herself as Eun Bayeol. The young man began to suspect that Lee Sol was a con artist who had deliberately approached him to swindle his wealth. Hae-young, who had previously been friendly, suddenly became arrogant and full of suspicion. His arrival, which came with the promise of high pay, was met with enthusiasm by Lee Sol, especially when Hae-young made the decision to stay for a few more days to thoroughly confirm the girl's identity. Feeling at an advantage and comfortable, Lee Sol allowed Hae-young to stay at her mother's inn, but she set the rate at 3 times the normal price.
요금은 3불입니다.
At night, Hae-young couldn't sleep well because he kept thinking about Lee Sol's identity. He suspected that the girl was his grandfather's biological daughter from a mistress. For a moment, he greeted the girl who was still engrossed in watching a movie in the yard while enjoying some popcorn. Lee Sol shared that she had been adopted from an orphanage when she was 6 years old. To this day, she is still waiting for the return of her father who disappeared a long time ago. Hearing that, Hae-young vowed to unite her to her dad.
외교관이잖아. 뭐 너 혼자 찾는 것보단 낫지 않겠어?
The next morning, Lee Sol received a visit from Professor Young-woo, who was searching for an ancient manuscript left behind by Emperor Sunjong, believed to be buried around the house. Since his college days, Young-woo had been obsessed with finding the crown prince and the princess, who were rumored to still be alive and had disappeared. However, he was disappointed because his finding on the emperor's literature was claimed by Yeonju and exhibited in the art gallery. Their relationship became strained because Young-woo was angry Yeonju's audacious actions.
너도 나한테 그 정도 염치는 있어야지.
Learning the bitter fact that Young-woo was his fiancé's first love made Hae-young furious. She retaliated against Lee Sol's actions from the other day by pretending to be his girlfriend in front of Young-woo. In the end, Lee Sol offered to team up with her so they could each win the heart of the one they loved. Haven't had time to negotiate yet, Hae-young urged Lee Sol to leave for Seoul because the grandfather wanted to meet the princess soon. Upon arriving at grandfather's house, the girl was greeted with such emotion that he immediately knelt before her.
Mama.
While crying, the grandfather then revealed Lee Sol's origins, which she was actually the great-granddaughter of the emperor. He gave an ancient box containing portraits of the late emperor and the crown prince. Before Joseon transitioned into the Republic of Korea, the emperor deliberately exiled his son to a foreign land and hid his identity for safety reasons. The emperor's descendants lived in hardship, while the royal wealth was officially managed by the Daehan Group. Based on the emperor's mandate, Grandfather promised that once he found the princess, he would hand over all the wealth half to the country and the other half to the princess as the rightful heir. It felt like a dream. Lee Sol was completely shocked to hear it. And on top of that, when she found out that her father had passed away, she immediately broke down in tears and tried to run away from grandfather. Equally astonished, Hae-young tries to chase and hug her as Lee Sol cries. The girl was truly devastated, convinced that her father was still alive just as he had promised he would return someday. After feeling abandoned in the orphanage for 20 years, Lee Sol wasn't ready to accept the truth and felt unworthy of being called the princess. Lee Sol asked Hae-young to take her home to Danha's house, but she wasn't allowed to enter and felt cold under the falling snow. Unable to leave the princess alone, Hae-young briefly offered Lee Sol to stop by his house for dinner. He jokingly and said would charge her for the room and dinner, just like he was charged when he stayed at the inn. While enjoying their conversation and the steak, both of them were startled by the sudden arrival of Yeonju, forcing Lee Sol to hide in the room. Yeonju's arrival aims to gather information on the status of the princess, rumored found. This clearly threatened her existence as someone close to the Daehan Group family. Because if the princess is legally recognized, then automatically the wealth of the Daehan Group will fall into her hands, and Hae-young, who is touted as the heir, will not receive a single penny from the ownership of the Daehan Group. As the prospective wife of Hae-young, Yeonju wants to ensure whether her fiancé is willing to support this plan or will sabotage it. At the same time, Lee Sol felt an unbearable stomachache. She also asked Hae-young to immediately take Yeonju out so that there would be no misunderstanding. She kept calling, but Hae-young was hesitant to move because he hadn't answered Yeonju's question. The girl couldn't hold the stomach pain any longer and was forced to run out of the room to the bathroom before the guest left. From the start, Yeonju noticed Hae-young's behavior was odd, as he wasn't focused on her fearing his fiancé would catch Lee Sol. Even though he tried to hide it, in the end, Hae-young couldn't escape when Yeonju pressed him about why there were women's shoes in his house. Unexpectedly, Lee Sol suddenly came out of the bathroom and Yeonju saw her. She strongly suspected that her fiancé was having a special relationship with Lee Sol. Hae-young suddenly turned pale and couldn't say anything. Yeonju held back her jealousy and chose to leave. She let out her frustration by meeting Young Woo and hugging him. The two end up spending the night together, and Young Woo chooses to forgive Yeonju's mistake. She was still trying to gather information about the missing descendant of the emperor. Meanwhile, news of the princess's return was officially released across various media outlets. However, her identity remains undisclosed to this day. The grandfather told Hae-young to shield Lee Sol from the media spotlight. He also visited the campus and hugged Lee Sol, covering her face from the camera flashes. Rumors became inevitable. In the end, Hae-young was forced to admit that the girl he brought was his fiancée so that the media would stop pursuing her. One problematic journalist grilled and tried to expose Lee Sol and claiming that she is the princess protected by Daehan. However, the news remained unclear and unconfirmed until the truth could be clarified. In the end, Hae-young dragged Lee Sol into Daehan Hotel to escape journalists. The girl was confused and even thought that Hae-young was going to ask her to check, in which led her to accidentally hit his face until his nose to bleed. The scandal of Hae-young's engagement to a mysterious girl who is still a student successfully became a hot trending topic, even surpassing the news about the discovery of the princess.
세상에 저렇게 방송해도 돼요?
That made Yeonju furious, and she demanded clarification from Hae-young. What was more surprising was that she saw Lee Sol in the same room at the Daehan Hotel. To cut down on misunderstandings, Hae-young revealed the secret that Lee Sol is the princess who must be protected from the media, until Yeonju, who originally hated the girl, now suddenly respects her. He was only pretending to be her fiancé in front of the media to suppress the news of the princess's return.
물론 취직시켜주고.
저도 도울게요.
As Hae Young